Hello, everybody. It's Grace Bell, author of Grace Notes and inquirer. Inquire into the stressful beliefs of life. And I wanted to make this special video today around money issues. Right now, I'm working with people in a close group on money and stressful thoughts about money. And really having you all in mind who care so much about money is why I wanted to make this video today, to tell a little story. I live in the exact same place I've lived for about 12 years, which is maybe the longest place I've lived since childhood home. I mean, I really have moved around a lot, and even in the same city, lived someplace and then began to think about someplace else being better and moved and kind of been really interested in looking at what's going on in neighborhoods and houses and styles and all that, just constantly on the move. And something happened around the same time as I encountered the work of Byron Katie that had me sort of settle down and stay in one place, as the way it's turned out. I live in a cute little tiny cottage that was built in 1940 as a vacation home for, a vacation cottage that people could rent, as I understand. And it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, little adorable place. I've held retreats here. I see my clients here, and there's a finished garage out in the back, so there is a little more room. But it's an adorable little space, and very interestingly, I've thought I could just live here for the rest of my life, and maybe that'll happen. Of course, we never know about the future. But interestingly, only 1 block away, literally, like I could throw a rock over to that end of the street in the neighborhood. From that point, along down the road, if I kept on walking south, kind of went out of my own door, walked just a little ways as far as I could throw, and then turned right, I would be on a road called Beach Drive. And it is one after the other of huge, gorgeous, stately houses, some of them built quite a few years ago, but some of them more recently, where they smashed down the house and then rebuilt it right on the water of Lake Washington. I mean, a gorgeous, prime real estate area in this big city of Seattle where I live. And people have docks and boats and enormous lawns down to their beachfront, the lakefront. And of course, it appears to take a lot of money, at least in my mind, in order to sustain a house like that or purchase it in the first place or build a new one and whatever's going on over there. When I was tanking on money, and I mean like felt like all my savings were drained. Anything that I'd ever saved in my life, which wasn't much, was gone. I was now going into debt. I was using credit cards to buy groceries. My children were eligible for reduced lunch at school. I was unemployed for about 2 years and looking for work. And it was in that time, like 12-ish years ago, interestingly, not long after I moved into this house that I'm living in, and also found the work of Byron Katie, that all this was happening. It was almost like the worst fears that I could ever have about money were happening. I was losing everything. All the cash was gone. And I had also given away some things or sold some things that I could. I was thinking about selling other things, but felt like I needed my car to keep looking for work. And some of those, I suppose, it's not critical sometimes when you look in the big scheme of things now. I still had gas in my gas tank of my car. And I was doing many things for trades, like taking some classes where I could do some work in exchange for being in the class. So I was kind of active and doing things and working with people out there in the world. But just to know, it just felt like the most critical time I've ever had with money, the most frightening time I've ever had with money. I actually thought my safety and my survival level was challenged, was like under total threat. It felt like it. I thought I had tried to sell my house and it wouldn't sell. Remember that thing that happened? Some of you live in those areas, some of you don't. In the United States, there was like this huge drop of housing prices. So I tried to sell my house and it wouldn't even sell, even though it's this cute little tiny place, too small. Anything that was sort of slightly undesirable meant that the house didn't sell. I mean, nobody was buying a thing. So I tried really hard to do that, even for sale by owner, and had help with it, and it didn't work. So I was just like, felt like I had tried everything. I just want to share that story because it was such a profound time of fear. And my thoughts and my story about money were that it was so untrustworthy. It was so volatile. It was not my friend. It could abandon me in any moment, in the most critical moments that I needed it. It was the thing that I needed even to just stay alive, like to eat and have shelter. And that felt like that was looming closely, that I wouldn't even be able to do that unless I moved in with a relative. And my mother, who is a loving and kind and wonderful person, said, of course, you can live in my basement. She had a large room down there if you need to. But that felt like the worst failure of my entire life. If that happened and it felt like it was close, I would be a total and complete failure. So, and with my kids, they would see this and they would see somebody who, their entire lifestyle changed because of money. So money did not feel like a friend. In that time, I took a little walk down the street frequently. I would pace and feel anxious and nervous, and I would start walking. And every single time that I took a walk, if I went down over there and turned right and started heading south along the road where all the people had the houses and the docks and the boats and the beautiful lawns, I would look at there and think, what did they do? What is going on? Why are these people having such a great experience with money and comfortable? So I'm assuming a lot there, right? And at ease and enjoying their lives and able to have these houses. And I can't even sell my own tiny little house for any profit. What is happening? And I would feel the comparison. I would feel how they did something right and I did something wrong. Which brings me to the little story that I have to share. I was very deeply busy doing the work. That is the wonderful piece that I had at the time. I knew the work. I had already done the school for the work. I was sitting there working on money and my thoughts about money, which were extremely excruciating, incredibly stressful. I just felt so unsupported by the world and by reality and by money. So very suspicious of the whole thing. So one day, my daughter, who ran around in the neighborhood and was just a young, maybe in second grade or something, had a friend right down that road in the neighborhood who she was playing with. And I went over to walk and pick up my daughter from the friend's house. And so the great, beautiful door opened and I could see the incredible and stunning view that so many of those houses have, and all the gorgeous glass, and looking out to see Mount Rainier shining down the lake, and that these people lived with this environment all the time. And right at that same exact moment, another little girl appeared on the front doorstep of this grand and gorgeous house, ready to either enter to play or ask if they could the children inside could play, including my daughter. And as we sat there and stood, and I'm picking up my daughter in the foyer there, the owner of the house was standing and just saying a little bit about how the play date had gone, and fun to talk, and doing the little greetings that parents do that maybe don't know each other super well. This little girl who had come running up, that lived somewhere else in the neighborhood, said, "How much did you pay for this house?" And I was like, oh my God. And I looked over at the owner, the only other adult standing there. I was like, how is he going to handle this? this is such a question to ask, and she doesn't know how rude that is and how horrible. And there was like this big pause, and the owner waited, and I waited, and the little girl was just looking up innocently. And then he said, well, it cost $1.4 million. And so we built it ourselves. And then he said just a little bit about the building process, which opened up a conversation for me standing there to be able to say, oh, and what was that like? And how did you design it? And where did you get that idea? And just have a conversation about something that I thought no one should ever ask about. And it's so far away from me, I don't even deserve to be in this conversation, if he only knew, that kind of thing. What is wonderful is from that, as I did the work on it later, like, oh my God, and even had thoughts about how somebody gets to be there, and that I could never be there in my life, and that'll be it'll be impossible. I'll never have that dream, and how honest and willing that house owner was in my neighborhood to be able to share that. I felt what it would be like to live a turnaround of feeling open and equal, no matter what my life circumstances were, or no matter what kind of house I lived in. I mean, I realized I wouldn't think of somebody less than me who was choosing to live in a small apartment somewhere or live in a tent somewhere. In fact, that would be kind of interesting, It's unusual, and it's an experiment, and it's wonderful. And there's all kinds of shelter and housing in the world. I also happen to know about myself that I kind of like small. I'm sort of interested in the tiny house movement, and, sort of more delicate and smaller things and cleaning them. And I like it to be beautiful, aesthetically beautiful, but I'm not really that interested in big, which is fine. It's just a preference. And so living the turnaround, one thing that I recognized is that maybe I could ask this person, since he was somebody in my neighborhood, how he came to be able to do that and decide that, and how he had worked in his life, and how money had come or flowed back and forth to him. And that's exactly what I got to do at some point, because there was another moment interacting in the neighborhood there where a conversation like that could happen. And many adults were invited over, and I got to spend time there. And I just, in a quieter moment, said, I'd love to know what you did in your life, because I'm really exploring career changes, more like on the inside. I'm exploring actually just having a job, actually making enough money to buy food. But it was, to open up that conversation instead of leaving myself out of it, to include myself in the conversation, to be a part of talking about the flow and the ebb of money, to be able to see that it's something that is concerning me in my life and I'm frightened of, and I don't know about it. So maybe asking other people might be of interest. And I felt so different just asking. He shared with me that he had inherited a business, and it was a family business, and they just carried on from there, and some of his story, and and what it was like, and it just seemed to bring it into such a normal perspective, that you can see how things happen over time and through the years. And I could see how in my family, which was very academic, people rarely, if ever, talked about business or having a business or owning a business. And in fact, my mother started one more midlife and began to learn a great deal about it, and has continued it to this day. And that was a brand new thing in a way, I could see from that moment and from doing inquiry on it, by writing about it, I could see pictures that I had in my mind of my own history and how actually people in business were kind of considered less sophisticated somehow. Like my whole family that I lived around, my immediate family was academic. My father was a professor. And you just study. You want to study, and you don't really care that much about lots of incoming funds or, I know that's all sort of false. But it was really interesting, just the feel of it, and to be able to study what it is that I had learned, what I saw, and what I was thinking and believing that caused such immense stress that it brought me to that moment in my life right then when I had so little and it looked like everything was critical. It was like, are you going to wake up now? Are you going to wake up now? And the way I know of waking up is to ask 4 questions and turn it around, to actually go into my stressful thoughts, not try to think positively, but to sit there with my thoughts like I did at that moment in that situation and write down first the most stressful things that I can possibly think, the most childish, immature, non-politically correct, you're not supposed to talk about money thoughts. I am upset in this situation because even about the little girl asking and about the pause, the moment of waiting in silence because are we going to talk about this or not? Feeling like, can I be trusted or not trusted to be hearing a conversation? All of that was going on, to take it and sit with it through inquiry slowly, maybe one thought at a time, one day at a time, to let it unfold. I mean, you've had these beliefs in place for years sometimes, since childhood. So it's okay if this process takes a day or 2 or 3 or several years of just watching and looking. I noticed that inquiry, as Byron Katie says, is a practice. And it's just peeling away and sinking in and noticing new things. So even now, as I'm deeply in money inquiry, because that's what we're all doing together, this little money group, I notice the things that appear about money. And you know what I do notice too? This is the good news. It is way less stressful than it once was. I will notice the flare of stress, like, oh my gosh. For example, right here during this class, I got a little notice from the IRS that I still owed a little more from last year's tax payments. I was like, what? And then I just sat down and I kind of set the thing down. It was like 6 pages showing there had been a little addition error. When I sat down the other day, which is the amount of time between feeling like what and setting the form letter down, not looking at it, and then the time I picked it up again to look at it was only a few days. I just put on my glasses and began to read one line, and it began to make perfect sense, and I looked on my tax return and saw where I double added something. It was totally my obvious mistake. It was no big deal. So off I sent the correction to the IRS. I could definitely still have thoughts about the IRS and being taxed. I could do that. But it's really interesting. Can I do that without stress and just watching and noticing, without fear? And can I take it to inquiry if I do have fear and give myself the compassion, the support, the love, the attention that I would need, just like a little child that's getting upset? Instead of saying, quit being so upset, sit there with inquiry. Ask the 4 questions. So living the turnaround today, you can just wonder as you do your work, ask the 4 questions, find your turnarounds, see if a turnaround clicks well, and then live it. And mine was, in that story, just to share with you, that, the living turnaround was to talk about money, to ask the questions that I had, just the right way. I mean, it doesn't mean to start doing something that's so out of your comfort zone that it's just like insane, or to do things that are going to make you feel ashamed later. But wonderful conversations about money. It was so good to be able to ask and get support and learn and realize I have a lot of learning to do. I'll have a lot of waking up to do when it comes to money. All right. Take care, everybody. Lots of love. Let me know how it goes.